I will call the meeting to order for the Pasco School District Board of Directors regular meeting, Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018. So we want to welcome you. We will begin tonight with the flag salute. Robinson Elementary, Principal Manthei.
Good evening, Board President Christensen, Superintendent Whitney, and School Board. I have some awesome students to introduce you to. Come on up. Perfect. Hey, Karen, turn that way. There we go. We have 6 fabulous 5th graders with us this evening, and all 6 of these 5th graders have qualified for the state chess tournament coming up in April. So they have been playing chess at school from 1 to 3 years, and all of them will be representing the Comets and Pasco School District coming up in April. So we're very proud of them and excited for them. We have Anastasia Cloy here with her dad, Lamar. Alondra with her mom, Maria. Jose Valencia with his mom, Josefina. Tobias with his mom, Maribel. Moises with his dad, Socorro, or his mom, Socorro, and his dad, Espirion. And Jose Rojas with his dad, David. Okay.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Also with us this evening is one of our fantastic chess coaches, Mr. Brazington, who also is a 5th grade teacher, along with Assistant Principal Mr. Duncan and Administrative Intern Jorge Trigo.
Thank you, Ms. Manthei, and thank you, students, for coming and joining us tonight. We have our student board members will be giving you a little token of our appreciation for your participation tonight. So we've heard great things about your chess. I've heard great things about your chess team. I know your chess coach, Mr. Brazington. In fact, I've had him come and work with some of our scouts in teaching them or in helping them get the merit badge. So appreciate you guys coming, and there's a couple of scouts sitting right behind him tonight that he's worked over in a chess match. So, but we'll talk a little more about that later. So thank you, Mr. Brazington. Thank you, Ms. Manthei, and thank you, students, for coming and joining us. So could we get the roll call? Present?
Present.
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 Present. Present. Present.
Thank you. So now, Mr. Shane Edinger with special recognition.
Good evening, Board President Christensen, Superintendent Whitney, and members of the board. Tonight, we begin with a proclamation from Governor Jay Inslee. Whereas the mission of Washington's public school system is to assure that all students achieve at high levels and possess the knowledge and skills to be responsible citizens of a democratic society and enjoy productive and satisfying lives. And whereas Washington's 295 locally elected school boards and 9 elected educational service district boards are the core of the public education governance system in our state. And whereas the districts and regions that they lead serve more than 1 million students, have a combined annual budget of approximately $15 billion, and employ close to 120,000 people. And whereas school directors play a crucial role in promoting student learning and achievement by creating a vision, establishing policies and budgets, and setting clear standards of accountability for all involved. And whereas school directors are directly accountable to the citizens in their districts and regions, serving as a vital link between members of the community and their schools. And whereas school directors and educational service districts provide a passionate voice of advocacy for public schools and the welfare of school children, and whereas it is appropriate to recognize school directors as outstanding volunteers and champions for public education, now therefore I, Jay Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, hereby proclaim January 2018 as School Board Recognition Month in the state of Washington, and I encourage all people in our state to join me in this special observance. So tonight we have the opportunity to thank our own outstanding volunteers and champions for education. They're not just our awesome Pasco School Board, they were also honored as a 2017 Board of Distinction by the Washington State School Directors Association. Now, board meetings, I should say, may only be twice a month, but there are countless hours of preparation and research that go into every issue and decision that you make. Besides the business that you see at meetings, our board members attend events and conferences, they visit schools and meet with legislators, both here at home and in Olympia. And of course, they're at everyone's favorite events, our graduations. A very conservative estimate puts your volunteerism at a minimum of 500 hours a year in service to the students, employees, and families of the Pasco School District. And we appreciate the time and thought that you spend to make sure that the best interests of all Pasco students are served. This year, we would like, again, to honor your contribution to Pasco schools with the donation of books to every school library. And inside each book, there will be a sticker with your names listed to let students know that the book was donated to honor each of you. This year, we purchased several books that were recommended by our school librarians. I'm going to share some of them with you now. Our elementary schools will get a selection of books this year, including these for our younger students. First, it's You Wouldn't Want to Be a World War II Pilot by Ian Graham. This book is part of a delightful series of books that brings something unusual to the study of history. It adds humor. In this edition, readers learn about the life of an American World War II pilot fighting in the British Royal Air Force. Our libraries will also be getting a copy of Brave by Svetlana Shemkova. The charming world of Berrybrook Middle School gets a little bigger in this highly anticipated follow-up to Shmakova's award-winning book, Awkward. Brave shares the story of Jensen. He's a middle schooler who saves the world and his friends on a daily basis in his daydreams. His middle school reality, though, is very different and a lot more challenging. For our older elementary students, we have a Newbery Honor winner. This book is The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. This New York Times bestseller is an exceptionally moving story of triumph against all odds. 10-year-old Ada has never left her one-room apartment. Her mother's too humiliated by Ada's twisted foot to let her outside. So when her little brother Jamie is shipped off to London to escape the war, Aiden doesn't waste a minute. She sneaks out to join him. And so begins a new adventure for Ada, her brother, and for Susan Smith, the woman who is forced to take the two kids in. Now, our middle schools will be receiving the fourth book in the Brixton Brothers Mystery Series. This one is called Danger Goes Berserk by Mac Barnett. A 12-year-old sleuth goes undercover and underwater to tackle 3 cases in this hilarious Brixton Brothers mystery. It seems like a routine case, or at least as routine a case as you can get when you're a 12-year-old private detective. Steve Brixton must don a neon wetsuit and work undercover to retrieve a stolen surfboard, but when the assignment goes all wrong, Steve finds himself caught inside mysteries involving wild surfers, pirate smugglers, thick-necked goons, and a 6th grader who can't find his gym shorts. And this year, our high schools are headed into the world of fiction with a second book in a trilogy. This is Glass Sword by Victoria Aveyard. The electrifying second installment in the Red Queen series has all the drama and intrigue needed to make it a New York Times bestseller. Mare Barrow's blood is red, the color of common folk, but her silver ability, the power to control lightning, has turned her into a weapon that the royal court tries to control. The crowd calls her an impossibility, a fake, but as she makes her escape from Maven, the prince, the friend who betrayed her, she uncovers something startling. She's not the only one of her kind. So we have those books that we'll be sharing with our libraries. And finally, we also have some certificates for you there and a copy of the governor's proclamation there at your desks. And it's also my pleasure now to introduce Principals Diana Sisney and Wendy Manthai, who have a bit more to share with you.
Board President Christensen, Superintendent Whitney, and School Board, it's our honor this evening to pause for a quick moment to say thank you. Each of you play a critical role in helping to support our goal of educating all of the students in Pasco School District. Nelson Mandela once said, Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world.
So on behalf of all the school administrators, we would like to say we are greatly appreciative for your dedication, the ongoing sacrifice that you give to volunteer your time to support our schools and our students and our entire community. And we appreciate all that you do to help change our world here in Pasco. And on behalf of each of the Pasco School District administrators, we would like to give you just a small token of appreciation to thank you for your hard work and all that you do. And as you open these, even from the wrapping paper down to the gifts inside, you will notice that they were created with love from our Pasco School District students. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate that. I think you probably should. So I think we're going to take a couple minutes and open these gifts. I know. Yep. Some artwork. You're getting this on camera, right? All right.
I'll just say thank you to those that made these. And I believe that the first year I was on the board, Ms. Sisney, your art students made us these, I don't even know which, cork boards with this painted beautifully. It's in prominent place on my bookcase. I still look at it every day because of where it is. And this is one of the reasons I think many of us like to serve on the school board. And one of the reasons that I became a pediatrician to work with kids because they keep us young and exciting. And just thank you so much to all your students that did this.
So there's, I imagine you can see some of the stuff we've got, a little piece of artwork in a frame. There's a book, and I guess each individual board member has pictures with them in it.
Yeah, they're individualized. I didn't know they had so many pictures of me.
Yep. So, yes, and then this bigger piece with some hearts in it. So, thank you. So I will just tell you that it's an honor to serve here and represent the community and to work with you. So we rely on your expertise as educators and community input to make good decisions. So we're just part of what makes this whole system work. So thank you for the recognition. So we get recognition tonight, but after this, we'll go back to work and recognize you for the work you do. So thank you very much, and thank your students for us, please. Any other board members want to make any comments? If not, we'll proceed.
I just want to say thank you to the students for this handwritten book. I always like getting handwritten letters or handwritten cards, and each of these pages, like other board members said, have pictures of us, but they have writing that tells writing and drawings that tell what school board members do, and so thank you very much.
Thank you. This is really cool. Thank you very much. That was very sweet. There were a lot of hours that went into those gifts, and we really appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, approval of minutes. If I could get a motion to approve the minutes of last meeting.
Board President Christensen, I move that we approve the regular meeting minutes from January 9th, 2018.
I'll second the motion.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of our regular meeting on January 9th, 2018. Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Nays? Yays or nays? All right, thank you very much. Looks like it passes. Agenda review. Ms. Whitney.
So there are no additions or changes to the agenda. However, I would like to call your attention to our request for an executive session under 4231-101G. We'll be tackling a couple of large items tonight. One having to do with personnel, and then the two is to finish the superintendent evaluation.
Okay, very good, thank you. So now is the time when we will open our meeting up to comments from the audience. We'd invite anybody who wants to address the board and give us any of your input to come to the microphone. Please state your name and your affiliation with the school district. And we will allow you 2 minutes. If you can please keep your remarks to 2 minutes, we would appreciate it. So first call for anybody who wants to address the board. Anybody who wants to address the board, now's your time. All right, we must be doing okay. So we will move on to agenda item number 8, communications, and we'll start with Mr. Lerman.
I just wanted to say congratulations to the district and to the board on the $1 million plus $30,000 extra to administrate it. Appropriation that we got for the Early Learning Center. The House and Senate passed their capital budget. And if President Christensen would allow, I just want to talk about a few memories of going down this and the process that we went through. I think there were lots of highs and lows. When several, must have been 4 years ago, I remember when several of us first joined the board, we sat down out here and we talked about what we wanted to accomplish as a board, and there was a laundry list, and we didn't, a lot of us, several of us knew some stuff that had already been serving on the board, but a lot of us were brand new and we were just kind of getting our feet wet. And one of the things we threw out there was early learning. It was just starting to be talked about more at a state and national level, and we were talking about remediation and a dollar spent now in prevention saves many dollars later in remediation. So how do we make this work to where we can help our earliest learners so that the school district, one, does right by the kids, but two, doesn't have as much remediation and work to do to catch those kids up once they hit kindergarten through 12. And we started to, we were talking about it, and we decided that we would go lobby, and we were all gung-ho about it, and several of us went to Olympia several times and talked to several of our representatives and legislators, and we were asking for quite a bit of money for them to pay for half or over half of it. But we thought we had the students' best interests at heart. We thought we were doing the right thing. We thought the money would just come, and it didn't come that first year. And the board and the district didn't give up, and we said, okay, let's go back and ask for a little bit less this next time around. and we ended up getting $300,000, I believe. And we started the Early Learning Center, and the board and the district got some hard, had some hard times, and sometimes there were community members that said we shouldn't be treating anyone but K through 12. And I think that paradigm's kind of shifted, not just locally, but it's locally, statewide, and nationally. And I think the community that does support us in this endeavor, not just to provide an early learning center for our kids, but the entire continuum of services that the district staff and the district administration and the board has put together, including Ready for Kinder, including all of the other programs that have been being expanded for this continuum of programs. So the Early Learning Center is one part of it, but I just wanted to say thank you to my fellow board members. Congratulations for sticking with it through the ups and downs, and I know our work's not done, but I think that was opening the Early Learning Center was a huge win. I know we have things we're working through, and it's going to just be great for Pasco, but also getting a special appropriation from our state government saying that this is what's right for kids. I appreciate everyone who stuck with it and put in lots of hours to make this happen, so thank you.
I just want to say thank you again for our special recognition tonight and for all of the gifts. They were really great. Thank you. I'll pass on to Mr.
I recently attended the Cocoa Cafe at Chiawana. It was a talent show of staff and students and included a very impressive and inspiring performance by our own Kristana Craig. And just super impressed with our high school students and their abilities and talents, and looking forward to visiting our other high schools and middle schools over the next couple months.
I also went to Cocoa Cafe, and I want to give a shout out to Kristana because she performed in a poem that she wrote, and it was so pretty, and it was just really great. And that was at Chiawana. But at Delta, I got my wisdom teeth taken out last Monday, so I did not go to school, and I slept more than I have slept in 10 months, so.
We had our triple header, and it did not go the way we would have liked at Pasco High, but it was good seeing our athletes fight, and it was a really good performance, and I think all those kids gave it their all, and I mean, I wish we would have won, but it's okay.
Finals week went fantastically at Chiawana. As Chiawana transitions from Cocoa Cafe into Mr. Riverhawk auditions, Chiawana is hoping that people, again from Pasco, the Pasco community, will show up and show support to our wonderful, handsome boys as they compete for Mr. Riverhawk. And not a lot has happened in these last 2 weeks, but something very big is happening tomorrow, and that is Miss Vanessa Quitos is gonna be 18. So if you could join us and sing happy birthday to the birthday girl. All right, you ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Vanessa. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it has been a busy couple of weeks, and I think I went to part of the triple header, not all of it, but it was definitely a valiant effort on both parts, and the wrestling meet especially, because that really determined who was going to be the champion in the area. And so we have really 2 strong schools in this district in wrestling this year, which is really exciting. And it was so fun to see the dance team compete. They have, I think for several years, have got some kind of state award at state. and taken the whole thing at state. Their dance team is just phenomenal, and my parents came to watch it too, and they were just really impressed. So it was really fun to be a part of that. Probably one of my favorite things that I did over these last 2 weeks was go to the Student Advisory Committee. Is that what they call that?
Superintendent, Student Advisory Council.
Okay, Superintendent, Student Advisory Council. I actually asked if I could come along because I wanted to see how it was going, and I was thrilled. Sometimes I felt like kids had even more opportunity to speak and give ideas than even they do here, and I loved their ideas. They gave ideas on what they wanted to see in a high school, what would be better for them. Windows in every classroom. That's something that most of them don't have, and I thought, that's a great idea. Windows, I'm sure that natural light is wonderful. They just had some really good ideas. And then they had these great ideas on how to include more kids, and those were just fascinating. It was just a wonderful thing to be a part of that council. And I also felt comfortable with having less board members here because I think the kids that represent those different schools that were at that council, they had Chiawana and Delta students there, they really had a lot of input, and then we get that input back. So I just think it's a great way to involve more of our students in some of our decision making. We also went to a local ledge conference, which was kind of scary, but I learned a little bit more, and hopefully this guy's kind of wrong. But anyway, it was an interesting experience. They're not always my favorite things to go to, but I do learn a lot, and I have learned how important it is these legislative experiences, or these legislative decisions are. We've hired somebody to help us over there, and she is critical in helping us make sure we get the money that we need for our kids. And even though some people I know none of our decisions are unanimously loved, I didn't know what she was doing, and I decided to get more involved to find out. And I've been very impressed with all of the things that she's doing. Right now, working to get some LAP funds some of our schools are just barely falling under the 50th percentile in poverty kids not poverty kids, free and reduced lunches in order to qualify for these. And she does a lot. And sometimes it's just a matter of educating the lawmakers that this isn't going to be good for Pasco. And the lawmakers, most of them don't want to do harm. They want to help, and they don't realize they're doing harm sometimes in the process. So it's very important. So anyway, that was great, and we'll be going to a conference here. This was a little one that was just here to get us ready for the conference that we have in a week. Yeah. So.
As Mr. Lehrman said, and as Ms. Phillips talked about as well, legislative session has begun. And this is the short session, so it's moving quite rapidly. There are, as Mr. Lehrman said, the capital budget was finally approved, and this has been a year in coming. They actually approved our funds last year at the end of the session, but it was kind of held hostage with some political maneuvering by our legislators. But one of the first things they did was resolve that and approve the capital budget for last year. I don't know that there will be any changes this year, but we do get $1 million coming our way to help pay for that early learning center. As Mrs. Phillips said, we've got legislative conference coming up this weekend. This is the first weekend I will not be there. I believe you're going, Mrs. Phillips, and our student reps going as well. Good. So a couple of years ago, we had 3 young ladies on the board. They, I think, all turned 18 about that time, and they were able to get sign their voter application on the governor's desk. So I'm not sure that'll happen this year, but don't forget you're old enough to vote tomorrow. So make sure you fill out your application. As Mrs. Phillips said, there was a workshop, the ESD workshop, where they did talk about the upcoming legislative session. Lots of things going on, of course, with the passage of 2242, which was the school funding bill last year. There was, I don't think everything went as intended. They're kind of like us. We don't work in the school district. We rely on people giving us information. So as Mrs. Phillips said, it's critical that we give them feedback. We do have Marie Sullivan, who is our legislative liaison, if you will, who works over there with us and keeps us informed. One of the things that we were able to do this year, and I think this was a discovery, I think largely on the part of Pasco, that there was an issue with the lab funding. And so we have been able to craft some legislation or at least have input in that hopefully will help resolve that funding issue. Not this past weekend, but the weekend before, I was in Olympia for a meeting of the WASDA Board of Directors. I'm sitting on that board now. And again, lots of discussion about the legislative session. And finally, I want to finish up with a couple of scouting things. It's been probably 6 months ago, I was approached by a young man who used to be in our scout organization. He's since moved. He's still in Pasco. He's a Chihuahua student, and asked if I would help him with an Eagle project. He wanted to put up a pole vault practice stand, and so he needed some engineering done on that, and I'm an engineer by day, and so I agreed to help him out. And this has kind of been one of these projects that just the schedules didn't line up, and I finally got together with the people at Pasco Machine, so a shout out to Pasco Machine who's helping us out with this project. But we've got the engineering done on it now. Now we're going into fabrication, and hopefully it'll be installed, and he will have completed his Eagle project a few months later than he wanted to, but it'll be done, and I will keep you updated on that. And finally, we've got two young men sitting here tonight, Jackson Kazir and Landon Salisbury, along with Mr. Lamar Palmer. They are here working on a merit badge. These are actually two of the scouts that I work with. They're in my troop. And they are here working on the Citizenship and the Community Merit Badge. One of the things they have to do is attend a public meeting and learn about some of the issues. So keep your ears open for some of the issues that we'll be talking about tonight, young men. And I want to just tie this in with Mr. Brazington, who was up here earlier. He worked with us in the Chess Merit Badge. And I played one of these young men in chess. I'm not going to tell you how that turned out. Mr. Brazington played both of them, and one of them won, and one of them, Mr. Brazington, maybe I should rephrase that. Mr. Brazington let one of them win, and Mr. Brazington took care of the other one in short order. But anyway, two fine young men here, and then Mr. Palmer, thank you for bringing them.
So while we're telling stories about Mr. Brazington, I wanted to acknowledge, I'm sorry that he's left. He does a cooking club for a group of his students, and they do it on Fridays. And the students come, they dress up, they cook a meal. They cook enough for the students to sit down and have a meal together, but then enough for students to take home. And so he's taught them things like cooking breakfast and challenged them to cook breakfast for their moms, etc. And so I did tell Mr. Brazington that I would like to get on that invitation list for the next dinner party. So I'm hoping that that happens. But just an extraordinary example of some of the things our teachers do that would be considered extracurricular activities. So certainly we recognize that it's part of our outrageous outcome, but it really goes beyond that in teaching kids how to connect and dress up. And he says the kids come, they think they, just full of confidence that day because they're dressed up and ready to have dinner together. So, Mr. Brazington's an example of our teachers who do things like that all the time. But just him being here tonight, I think, was a good reminder for me to be able to mention that. I did want to remind the board and invite the public to CHS on Friday at 2 o'clock is our winter graduation. And then also just getting really a proactive invitation out there for February 8th from 8:45 to noon is the Franklin VIP Day. I also wanted to just highlight or advertise maybe a little bit of a commercial. We have recently started offering childcare during our board meetings to increase access for families. So childcare is available for our families from 6:30 to 8, free of charge to the family. So if you know people who would usually come but don't have childcare, we're offering that now for our families as a service based on a community member's request. So we were just more than happy to fulfill that request and thought, yes, absolutely, that's a missing piece. And I have to admit, I was slightly embarrassed. I didn't think of it myself. So I'm glad that it was brought to our attention. And then just lastly, I just wanted to thank the administrators for including me in this very special recognition. When I was very carefully opening my wrapping paper, one of the little sayings written on it said, keep doing what you're doing. And I think, okay, I'm going to just keep doing what I'm doing. So that'll be my new mantra. So thank you so much.
Okay, so that concludes communications. We'll now move on to 9A, reports and discussions, ESSA accountability and outrageous outcomes.
Yeah, so if you as a board remember, last board meeting, you had a kind of a big overview from Dr. Dennis McGuire about the OSPI's ESSA Accountability Index. Over the course of the last year or so, we've been working on our outrageous outcomes, and one of the things we've kept talking about is a way to benchmark growth and monitor those outrageous outcomes. And so as district staff, we've been working really hard to create a mechanism for doing that that really made sense, that with the other accountability measures that are out there. So getting the information from the state and the update from the last meeting was really important. And Mark has put a tremendous amount of effort in creating a growth and monitoring framework for those outrageous outcomes that aligns with the ESSA framework where appropriate, but also makes sense for the system and highlights how we're going to utilize growth targets, both at the district level and then down into the building and classroom level over time. So with that, I just, want to acknowledge Mark's hard work on this and thank him publicly for his patience in kind of dragging me along in learning how this could come together, and turn it over to Mark to highlight the work.
I kept telling Michelle how much fun the project was, and she's like,
We have very different definitions of fun.
Yes. Anytime you can work in a spreadsheet, it's fun to me. So hopefully we can translate that spreadsheet work into this PowerPoint presentation. So with that, President Christensen, Superintendent Whitney, members of the board, I'm excited to present to you a proposal of how the district intends to set and monitor goals towards its strategic outcomes. So the district produces several pieces of data over the course of its operations, and each stakeholder group within the district monitors the appropriate indicators. The broader the stakeholder scope, the less detailed, more summarized the indicators become. So as we go up that pyramid, the more summarized information that we're looking at. Starting at the base of the pyramid there, instructors monitor classroom level data to inform their teaching. Taking a step up, district and building administration monitor the key indicators to allocate necessary resources. And then finally at the top there, the board members monitor the impacts of the district resource allocation decisions by monitoring the growth goal targets through the key benchmarks. So through each stakeholder's focus on the appropriate indicators, we can maintain alignment to our strategic outcomes, ensuring growth targets are met and then results occur. And then just kind of a natural byproduct of meeting those results is that we're meeting those external accountability requirements like the ESSA requirement that Dr. McGuire explained to you in the last board meeting. So we'll walk through the different sections in this pyramid, examining a little bit more, each of them a little bit more in depth. We're going to go ahead and start at the administration level and then work our way up. So here's an example of what the dashboard for key indicators would look like. It's more comprehensive, more dynamic, allowing district and building leadership to slice and drill down and really get answers to the questions that they have and target and reallocate their resources as necessary. So even though these key indicators are intended to be monitored by the district and building leadership, these measures would be something that we would bring to you in like a data bite report and give you a deep dive into these. But the primary focus would be for district and building administration to monitor these indicators. And here's the list of indicators. These all should look familiar to you. These are the indicators that you saw in Superintendent Whitney's outrageous outcome reports. District, as I mentioned, district and building administration will monitor these more detailed indicators. Data, for the most part, is collected on these indicators more frequently, so resources can be reallocated and adjusted throughout the school year. And the idea is that these indicators would feed up into those outrageous outcome benchmarks that would be monitored by the board. So here's a prototype of what the monitoring dashboard would look like for the board. We're using the third grade benchmark as an example, but the board dashboard would contain similar elements for all the outrageous outcomes, graduation, ninth grade on track, etc. So you can see that this prototype has a different focus. The focus of this dashboard is monitoring those outrageous outcome benchmarks and the identified growth goals. So the dashboard is designed to allow the board to quickly answer the question, how is the district performing towards its outrageous outcomes or its strategic outcomes? Historically, what we've brought to you have been those key indicators. You saw on the last slide, there's a ton of data there. It's great, but it's very hard to, at quick glance, just to simply say, how are we doing? All right, and for each outrageous outcome, we'll pick a single measure that best represents progress toward that outcome. That'll be represented in a chart there. We'll display progress toward our growth goals. That's the gauge on the right. And then we'll also offer a summary of those key performance indicators, the indicators that the building and the district admin are monitoring on the bottom left there. Just a simple, did we see an uptick, downtick, and in how many? So as I mentioned, at the board level, we'll have a single measure for each outrageous outcome. As you'll see later in the presentation, it's important that we have a corresponding body of state data in order to set our growth goals. The table here contains state and district metric and the district metric, and then you can see the corresponding state metric that we'll use to monitor and set those growth goals. And you can also see that there's some difference in the state and district growth goals on the first three outrageous outcomes. I think you have a cheat sheet up there that you can see the different indicators, key indicators that the administration is monitoring, and then the benchmarks that the board will monitor. So just to kind of step you through the different or those differences that I mentioned. Our third grade reading goal, it's that all students will be reading on level in their language of instruction. Unfortunately, the SBAC is given in English, and so this isn't a really good way to monitor that goal. The STAR, however, is given in English and Spanish, so it's much more appropriate, but we don't have a comparable data set to the STAR at the state level, so we will be comparing the third grade SBAC, and I'll show you in the coming slides how we're going to compare those two metrics. So the closest state metric for our algebra outcome is math failure rate at ninth grade. The majority of ninth graders typically take, or algebra is typically taken at ninth grade, and so we thought this would be an appropriate comparable data set to use to benchmark. So it's something to also mention about that algebra goal is that it's a pending key indicator for at the state level. So I imagine once it gets adopted, they'll begin collecting data and reporting data for algebra passing rates across the entire state. So we'll have a more suitable data set to benchmark ourselves off of. And lastly, the way the district and state are defining ninth grade on track is also slightly different. The district considers, as of this year, ninth graders that earn 6 credits on level, whereas the state considers a ninth grader on level if they did not earn any Fs in their ninth grade year. Slightly different, but still still okay for benchmarking and setting and determining some comparisons. On time and extended graduation rates, we have a similar definition as the state. And then lastly, we will not have a comparable state data set for extracurricular participation. That's unique to us, so we'll just determine our goals internally in regards to that outrageous outcome. So we had lots of discussion on what method should be used to set goals. We inquired with other districts. We inquired with the state on their logic. There's little to be found other than there's like a good gut feeling, this is just what we should go for, or there's some type of conversation that ended in a compromise. We wanted to have more logic to the way that we set our goals. We also agreed that the goals should be realistic and they should be based on districts that had the same internal and external influences. So external influences being forces such as funding, legislation, regulations. Pretty much all districts around the state have very similar external forces. Internal influences would be things like the makeup of the student population. So that's unique per district. So in that discussion and having that discussion, this led us to the idea of setting growth goals based on a peer group, and then also setting stretch goals based on a state group. Additionally, we thought our goals should be based on growth, with the assumption that growth will take us to proficiency. So our proposal is to use a 3-year average annual growth rate. Using growth rates help compare measures. It kind of abstracts away from the measures, and we can compare the SBAC and the STAR, so we can compare different measures. And then additionally, growth is also emphasized over proficiency in the ESSA accountability framework that was described to you last board meeting. So we feel like we're on the right track as far as putting great weight on growth. So the district's goal across all outrageous outcome benchmarks is to be within the top tercile of growth among our peer group. And then our stretch goal would be to be among the top tercile of growth among all districts in the state. All right, and I'll walk you through how we're going to determine that. So calculating the growth rate is pretty straightforward. Here's an example of third grade ELA SBAC data. It's important to note that its growth rate is different than just a simple percentage point increase. All right, you hear growth rate commonly used in business world or financial world. If you have $50, you experience a 10% growth rate. You now have $55. 10% times 50 is 5. Add that on to your original amount, and you got 55. All right, so we're taking that same approach. So using data over the past 3 years, you can see here, we determine the annual growth rate by simply dividing the ending number by the beginning number and then subtracting 1. And that gives us an annual growth rate. From there, we average the two growth rates to kind of smooth out the trajectory and smooth out those outliers. After the each district's average 3-year average annual growth rate is calculated, the growth rates are then ranked and then bucketed into a lower, mid, and upper tercile. So I mentioned that our growth goals will be based on a peer group. The peer group was determined by relative proximity of 5 demographic characteristics unique to Pasco: student enrollment, English language learner, low-income, Hispanic, and non-white populations. These are the subcategories that you commonly see. You saw it in the ESSA framework, and you'll see it in other state reporting. In order to be included in the peer group, districts had to have similarities in at least 2 of these distinguishing characteristics. So this left us with 11 school district peer groups. You can see, looking at their demographic data, some of them are very similar and some of them are relatively similar. So here's a sample of the peer group ranking based on that average growth rate for 3rd grade ELA SBAC. You can see the 3 years of data and how that translates into an average annual growth rate. That growth rate is ranked and then bucketed. Each district is bucketed into a tercile, lower, mid, and upper. In this scenario, Franklin Pierce, Mount Vernon, and Sunnyside are among the top tercile of growth in this peer group. So we would need to experience a growth rate of 6.7% to 19.6% to meet our goal of being in that upper tercile of growth for among our peers. So setting the growth rate goals, they're good, but it's helpful to communicate goals in a way that are familiar to stakeholders. Growth rate is just not a common term in the education industry. So we would propose translating the goals back into specific proficiency targets. We would do that by taking the median growth rate of the upper tercile and using that to set targets. So aim dead center for that upper tercile. If we hit that, we've got room on both sides to, and we'd hit our upper tercile goal. So in the table, you can see an example of what that means for our peer group and our state group stretch goal, and how that plays out over the course of 3 years. So bringing it all back to where we started, hope I've explained how the district intends to set its growth goals and the metrics that will be used by each stakeholder group to monitor progress towards those goals. Tonight is really just an opportunity to share with you our thinking around goal setting and gather some feedback and input from you. Based on that feedback and this work, we'll then bring back some specific goals to you later in the spring that would apply to the following school year.
So thank you, Mr. Garrett.
Yes.
Board members have any questions for Mr. Garrett?
I feel like everyone had a lot of fun, the same amount of fun that I did. It's based on the silence. It was,
So I've got a question for you. The information that you pull out here, so you've identified, is it 11 school districts that are in our peer group?
correct.
Is that data, is that sortable so you can bring it into a spreadsheet and
Correct.
sort this out pretty quickly? You don't have to hunt and peck through each one?
Nope.
It
Yeah,
makes
this
it-
is all available on the state website. So this was
So
a
it-
relatively easy process.
So it's not real labor intensive,
Nope.
so we can get this information really quickly and
Yes.
determine pretty easily where we are. Good. Good.
Thank you. Not really a question on how we're doing or what we're doing here, but do we know what's Sunnyside doing? If this is the way we're going to rate this, what kind of things are they doing to get these kind of growth numbers?
So funny that you asked. We had a pretty robust conversation about that. Susana, Dr. Reyes and I, and Carla Lobos and I, and Valerie Aragon this afternoon were looking at this as well. And really, our understanding of what Sunnyside is doing is drilling it down to very specific growth targets and looking at that individual student data. So The next presentation that you'll see is Carla next time bringing this back and saying, okay, this is how the board will look at its growth targets. Here's how the building principals will utilize this with leadership teams and their PLCs. And then also highlighting some work being done in the district by a gentleman named Dr. Cruz, who I have had the opportunity to sit in his trainings. And then I was in there for just like 7 minutes today and watched him, and it literally changed my life as an administrator. He's absolutely fantastic. So with all of those pieces lining up for us, we're like right behind Sunnyside. Like Sunnyside is just a little bit in front of us in terms of that level of focus. So I would fully expect to see us, because we're trailing just behind Sunnyside by a couple of years, start to move in that trajectory with the level of focus that this will provide.
Dr. Cruz, where'd you say, is he from Sunnyside?
No, Dr. Cruz is a consultant that's come in from California. And again, Carla will be able to really dig into that work with you. But his focus is on leadership strategies and skills around how to have collaborative conversations and data and get really targeted and focused to move the needle with student achievement and closing the achievement gap. I'm looking for, how'd I do? Oh, yay, okay.
There were several nods.
Did you see thumbs up too? That was.
I really like your graphics. I enjoyed looking through this, but I didn't understand all of it until you explained it. So I really like the fact that you're going to, instead of taking growth targets, you're going to put those back to, we want to make this much percentile growth. Is it per year or every 3 years?
We'll have, every year we'll have proficiency targets that we will.
I think another question that I feel is really important is, the board has these goals because they're, they were very research-based. We found that kids, if they read on level at 3rd grade, they go, and so these affect them in their graduation rates, which is ultimately what we want our kids to do. We want them to graduate, and we want them to have a plan forward. And so these things all help with that. The thing is there's a lot of focus on junior high and high school and not as much on the elementary schools. So are the elementary schools going to have these kinds of goals as well that we encourage them to get to?
Yes, yeah. They'll all buildings will have goals, and a lot of that data is captured in those key indicators.
Okay.
You can see there, so.
Okay,
I don't know.
great.
So I also just wanted to call your attention to the indicator cheat sheet that's in front of you. One of the things that's different than the reports that you have seen from me over the past 2 years is the addition of STAR, which, like, for example, in the 9th grade algebra, or the 100% of the algebra goal in 9th grade, that STAR data would be available K8. And then even looking at how do we provide a data tracking mechanism beyond the goal. So just because 3rd grade reading on grade level by the end of 3rd grade, what about those students who are not reading on grade level after grade 3? Looking at long-term, how do we build some mechanisms for monitoring that in as well? So I just wanted to call your attention to the addition of the STAR. That's different than what I've reported on in the past. And then also under reading, the addition of the ELPA, which would be a requirement under ESSA for us to take a look at, and also is a K-12 assessment. So again, building in those metrics for those goals that are kind of off grade level, that has multiple, so it would include multiple grade levels. The message that we want to send is we all own all of these goals. It doesn't, the 9th grade goal doesn't start in 9th grade, that there's data K-8 that we're monitoring. And you saw it in Curie's presentation tonight, we're starting that college-going culture at Curie, having those conversations. And many of our elementaries, or all of our elementaries, are doing similar things to that as well.
Thanks, Mark. I just wanted to say I'm pretty excited. I mean, seeing what Sunnyside's doing, we've said we want to be a database-driven decision-making board, and seeing that if we're a couple years behind them or a year or whatever it is, that digging into the details like that is leading to growth like that. I think that's an awesome thing to lead with at the building level also, because I know that sometimes it's a slog to look through or maybe it's super fun, look through this data. And sometimes I know that teachers and parents and even students sometimes go, man, we're testing the heck out of people. Why are we doing this? Well, I know that tests aren't the only measure of success here, but just to see that those tests and that success and that growth rate that they're doing is leading towards those students learning the state standards, which is really what we're here to make sure that they learn, is awesome to see that the actions they're taking is leading to improved results. So thanks for sharing that.
Well, and thank you as a board for the direction and the patience in us trying to connect all these dots. Had we come out with this in advance of knowing and understanding the ESSA accountability framework, I think we would have missed some opportunities to connect some dots. I also think the piece that's really important to highlight here, and Curie did such a nice job for us in the study session, is it's about the data in collaboration with a growth mindset. We're not there yet, and celebrating along the way the pathway to get there. And this is all about growth. And with that targeted, focused on growth, we will get to proficiency. So we, I think, are just in an extraordinary opportunity of alignment right now, and it's an exciting time for us as an organization. And it's with the hard work of the people in this room and like them that are not in the room that we have made it to this place. So I appreciate the efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Any comments from anybody in the audience that wants to address the board?
Yeah, we really appreciate this. This is exciting for the board because it's been a very long time coming, and a data dashboard, all of these things that have been dreams are finally coming to reality. So I really think it's going to help propel the school district forward. And like Scott said, we don't want to just teach to the test, but the only thing we have to measure success are some of these data points. And there are other things that we're going to use as well, but that's something that helps us to get to where we're going, so it's important.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Moving on to 9B, bond projects update, Dr. Susana Reyes.
Mark, I feel like we should high five or something. Like, that was awesome. Thank you. So with that, I'd like to invite Dr. Susana Reyes up to the board, who is here, up to the podium, who's here to give us, I believe this is our first public presentation on bond project updates. This is a first in a series of presentations and conversations that we're going to have this spring and really into the next year and a half, regarding not only our construction, the bond construction projects are ongoing for the next 3 to 4 years, but not only around the bond construction projects, but continuing our long-term facilities management planning process. So again, tonight is an update on the bond projects, and Dr. Reyes is also prepared to share kind of an outline of what the subsequent reports will look like through March.
Thank you. Yes, it is the first presentation.
You got this. You can do it.
So good evening, President Christensen, members of the board, Superintendent Whitney. This presentation is the first in a series of reports, just like Superintendent Whitney mentioned, regarding bond project updates and facilities planning. A brief timeline of upcoming meetings is shown on the next slide. Oh, actually, yes, shown on this next slide. And as you can see, upcoming meetings will include information regarding bond sale and financing, long-term facilities management planning processes, capital facilities plan, the plan that we submit to the city where we access impact fees, a study session on school capacity framework and data, and then in March we'll come back to the board for requests to take action on the capital facilities plan. But this evening's presentation is going to focus on information about the district's current bond projects. The successful bond, which passed in November, will result in 2 new elementary schools, 1 new middle school, and the replacement of Stevens Middle School. And tonight I will share information regarding the current status of each of these projects. So first, Elementary 16 is scheduled to open in August of 2019. This is an artistic rendering of the front view of the school, which will look very much like Curie STEM Elementary. This graphic provides you with the timeline of events leading up to the completion of the school. The purple represents the bond election that took place back in November. The blue is the design phase. The red is the review process, which involves a review by appropriate agencies, including Department of Health, Labor and Industries, and the City of Pasco. And then once any required changes are completed and approved, the bid process begins, which you can see is the gray bar. The construction phase is in green, and the yellow is the date of occupancy, which you can see for elementary 16 will be August of 2019. These are some additional details about elementary 16. Design West Architects was selected for the project. The school will be located on Road 84, north of Chihuahua High School. The design for this school was completed in 2016 and uses the same floor plan as Curie Elementary. This standard Pasco floor plan was updated for Rosalind Franklin and will be used for subsequent schools and is a cost savings measure for the district. Also, in an effort to ensure that the project would be ready or would be shovel-ready, the educational specifications were completed prior to the February 2017 bond, which did not pass. And we placed it on the measure that was in November. And that process included participation by principals, teachers, and district staff. Site work for the school will begin in April, and that will involve road work, utilities, excavation, leveling, and prep work for construction. Bidding will take place in June and July of 2018, and once this step is complete, a groundbreaking ceremony will be scheduled. Elementary 17 is scheduled to open in August of 2020. And this is the timeline for elementary 17. As you can see, construction, which is in green, is scheduled to begin in August of 2019 and will be completed in time for occupancy 1 year later. Some additional details about elementary 17. Again, Design West Architects will be constructing the school. It will be located on Burns Road, east of Road 100. We are in the process of beginning the design phase and are establishing a district steering committee, which will include district staff, principals, and PAE representation. The first meeting for this committee takes place on February 1, and the preliminary site layout design is underway. Its location is on the same property as Middle School number 4, and the site design will ensure efficient use of land. We expect to have an excess of 10 acres of land, and we'll be providing you with future updates regarding the use of that portion of land. The initial topographic survey work and geotech work has been completed. I'm learning all sorts of really cool terminology. So, the next school, Stevens Middle School, is scheduled to open in January of 2021, and this is an artist's rendering of what the school could look like. The timeline for Stevens Middle School, as you can see, construction is scheduled to begin in August of 2019. That's in the green. And we expect occupancy in January of 2021. There will be additional work that will continue after occupancy, and it'll go through August 2021, and that is in orange. And that will include the demolition of the existing school and site work for athletic fields. For Stevens Middle School and Middle School number 4, MMEC Architectural was selected. Stevens will be located on the current site just south of the existing school. Educational specification work is actually underway. We have a district steering committee which includes district staff, principals, and PAE representation. They've participated in an initial meeting with MMEC to learn about the process and to review the timeline and steps for planning the general direction of the project. MMEC and district staff also met with Stevens staff last week to review the overall process and invited questions. Additional feedback and questions from the staff will be gathered to further inform the process, and MMEC will also work with Stevens principal to plan activities to involve students to the extent possible. Members of the steering committee also visited 2 new middle schools in neighboring districts and have actually provided feedback regarding their visits to MMEC for as the design phase continues. The initial survey work, as well as geotech work, has also been completed. Middle School number 4, scheduled to open in August of 2021. The timeline for this school, you see the green bar again, construction beginning in August of 2019 and will go through July of 2021 with occupancy scheduled for August of that year. Some of the details regarding the educational specification process for middle school number 4 are very similar to Stevens because we're doing that together. But this school will be located on the same site as Elementary 17 on Burns Road, east of Road 100. Again, the same district steering committee. Working with, on the Stevens project is going to assist in guiding this process and includes membership from district, principals, and PAE. For this school, the preliminary site layout design is in process and the initial survey work as well as geotech work has been completed. We also plan to solicit additional feedback and questions from staff, and we'll gather that as we move forward in the process, and we're going to be exploring ways in which to involve as many stakeholders as possible for each of these projects. So the district welcomes school board participation and requests that a board member serve as a representative to support and act as a board liaison for both the educational specifications process for all 4 schools as well as the long-term facilities management process. So President Christensen, I would refer to you for direction regarding the process for selecting a board member rep to serve in this capacity, and I welcome if you would like to discuss that at this time.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Reyes. Let's, can we just, does any board member have any questions on any of the previous before we talk about a representative?
I had a question. Can you refresh us on why we're not building elementary school number 17 at the same time as elementary school 16? Is it schedule? Is it funding? And then number 2, are we using the same footprint, the Pasco Elementary School footprint for elementary school number 17? And if so, why is the design still 15 months long?
Okay, so I'm going to do my very best to respond to that. If I don't provide you sufficient information, I'm happy to do some additional research and bring that back to you. For middle or elementary 16, the design process for that took place before we attempted the bond in February of 2017. So that process was already well underway, and the work that was done for that to take place was done so that it would be ready for to actually begin the work once the bond passed. It didn't pass, so we kept it on the measure for the November bond. There is a state-required D-form process that school districts have to follow for every school that they build, and it is tied to the funding structure under the School Construction Assistance Program. So in order for the district to be eligible for that state match, or the state match dollars, there's specific steps that have to take place. So all of that had already taken place and had been in process for elementary 16 prior to the February bond, at least some of them anyway. And we also had the funding for that. When we ran the bond in November, elementary 17 was an additional one. And so that work hadn't yet been done. So we still have to go through every step of what is called the D-form process to be able to begin that project to actually begin any real groundbreaking work. So that's part of that question.
But refresh me on why we didn't do the D-form numbers for elementary school number 17, because that was on our last bond.
Okay,
also.
so then I had that incorrect, so.
So
Why didn't we, I'm just curious, I'm trying to remember, and if there's not a quick answer, you can email. I think I'm hearing that the reason we can't run 17, build 17 at the same time as 16 is because of the D-form process. And I was just curious, is there a reason we didn't fill out the paperwork at the same time for 16 and 17 just to afford us flexibility? Is it really a funding issue, or is it just a paperwork issue?
No, it's a funding issue also. There was money put together to do the specifications on elementary 16. There was no funding for specifications on elementary 17. So we had to pass the bond to be able to start the funding to start that process.
Yeah.
And then the second question I have is it, we're using the same plan, we're going to build the same school? Is that a true statement, the Pasco school for elementary number 17, or are we redesigning?
We will use, so the plan that we used for Franklin was a modification of the Pasco plan. So now it has become the Pasco plan. So that plan will be for 16 and for 17. So your question is,
We have 15 months in
Right.
for 17. Are we really going to have a 15-month design process?
And that's a question that I'm going to defer to Susanna. And if you need to get some additional information together and get that back to the board, that is fine.
Sure. In reviewing the deform process, there's specific timeframes that are tied to every step. And it does take time to gather the information, to submit paperwork for the district to review, to consider approving, and then submittals to OSPI, and then the turnaround. So there are specific steps, and it involves a lot of work from different groups.
Maybe
So-
Randy or Kim can email it. I wouldn't think that the 15-month design process would include that, but if you guys want to email, I'm just curious, is that an extended time? Are we really going to be doing extensive design work for 15 months on a existing Pasco plan? And if so, can you email me what the challenges are? Did we create additional challenges for ourselves by putting an elementary school and a middle school on the same one? Or is it really not a 15-month design?
So I think what I heard Susanna saying is perhaps a better qualifier is design and deform process, and it's the timeline of the deform process, not just the design work, that's going to take the 15 months.
So I'm going to weigh in here too. So I think we could pull it in 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 months. But then we're opening a school in December or November. I think more than likely what we've done, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, but we said, when are we going to open it? I mean, it makes sense to open these schools in August. And so we've scheduled it to open in August, which works best with our school year. Figure a year for construction, you've got some bid time, some review time. I mean, we could probably push start back till June or July of this year, but the period is that long because that's just kind of how it works out.
So maybe we can just sharpen the pencil, because I'm just saying the public can look at it and say, we already have a design. We're saving money by using an existing design. Why do we have such a long design process, which usually would lead towards additional cost? And maybe we add that that's not really all design, it's a deform, et cetera, paperwork.
Okay,
So I
thanks.
think if you're looking at that as we've got a team working on it full-time for that long, you're not looking at it accurately. So we have a design for a building. It's going to be very similar to what we've got as far as a building goes. But that's just part of it. Now we've got the site that we have to prepare. We've got utilities that have to go in. We have to get all the site, find out where the electricity, sewer, water, storm runoff and all that stuff. And Mr. Meyer, I'm not sure what your name is, but I see that on your shirt. I'm sure you're familiar with all of this stuff. Mr. Fox.
James is his first name.
Oh, James Fort.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Mr. Fort. So all of these things take time, and it's, you're not working on it full-time and burning up money while you're doing that. You're simply, it just takes time to put these things together. So if you've got a 15-month window, you're going to schedule it to where it makes sense to put it in. But unfortunately, with the way we would open schools, typically in August, whether it's 15 months or 10 months, it's still going to open in August. So it seems like it should be simple. We just plot that building on that lot and away we go, but there's a lot more to it than that.
So is the reason that we're opening up the middle school, it would be so nice to open those two things up that are on the same site together, especially for all of the boundaries work and everything else. Is that just one project too many for the district to take on? I just want to know what the reasoning is for the fourth middle school to be pushed out so far. I think that might be the biggest question we get as a board too, is why the middle school's pushed out.
Well, and I don't have a response for that prepared for you this evening. I'm happy to gather the information or have Randy speak to it if he'd like to.
I would submit it's the same thing. We would open it in August. It makes sense to open it in August or sometime that summer. Middle schools take longer to build. It looks like we've got the same design period on this, which there'll be a lot more activity going on in design of this fourth middle school than there is of elementary 17. But the period's the same just to match up with our opening schedule. So I don't think we're going to bring the construction in of a middle school, especially when you take into consideration the site. We're not going to compress that much more than 2 years. And let's say it's, I don't know, is it 24 months? Looks like it's 24 months. Let's say we get it down to 18 months. You know, we cut 6 months off of it. Well, we could open it mid-year, but that doesn't make a lot of sense because now we've got to adjust boundaries mid-year. I think it's just the way it lines up from where we would naturally open it, and then we back the schedule back to where we are today, and that's kind of how it works out. I mean, it would be, you could probably shorten that process by, you know, a few months, but then you're compressed and you're not opening it at a
I
convenient
would just
time.
ask that we put what we're going to do into the schedule because, again, with the construction period, if we show that Stevens takes 17 months to build, 18 months, and that the new middle school takes 2 years, people say, why? And it's hard to go say, well, they're really both going to take the same amount of time to build, but we just make the period longer. So if there's other things going on, I think we should say it, but otherwise we're going to be answering those questions.
Sure,
over
and I
over
think
again.
we can bring back a more comprehensive rationale and justification for the schedules at a later time.
So any other questions on construction, timelines, anything related to that?
Well, thank you. These are questions that we are getting all of the time right now. So having this information is very helpful, and knowing some of the reasoning behind it will also be helpful so that we can help inform the public, and so that as the district, we can also inform the public, because I think there's going to be a lot of questions about this. The community is very excited for these 4 schools.
So as you're getting questions from the community, if you send them to Dr. Reyes, we can also create a frequently asked questions on our bond website, which she is going to show here in a minute. But if you can send those to us, we can make sure that we have an answer that's publicized and consistent.
Another thing I think that we need to consider in this whole process is being able to get good bids on the construction and getting, if you've got 4 bids going in that you want to have all the construction done at the same time, maybe you're not going to get as good a bids and as good as construction companies coming forth with bids to get the bids all at the same time. You know, we've gotten good bids in the past, and other districts have things going on also, so.
Is the plan to put this information on the website?
She just needs direction around this.
Well, yeah, I'll get there. I'm just wondering, is this going to be available?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, great, thank you. So, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, I kind of want to summarize. We had a lot of discussion there. So I think I had similar questions to Mr. Lehrman's, and I think maybe just calling that phase design and site planning or something like that, that explains that this isn't just like the layout of the building, which is kind of how I would think of it too. Like, we already have the design of the building, but obviously it's more than that. And just a simple way to communicate that maybe would be design and site planning or something like that. And then, combine that, I agree with Mr. Christensen. It's, it's just kind of the 2019 was not going to be possible for that elementary school. But to wait till 2021 to open it would provide a big hindrance. There's tons of houses up there, and so I think that was just the balance. So if we can communicate that simply, I think that would be helpful. And if I can, I'll just add a question that I've already gotten multiple times is, are these elementary schools going to be STEM schools? So we need a timeline of when we're going to address that. And as I've kind of brought up multiple times, is that we need to have some sort of reevaluation of our STEM initiatives as a district that was started 3 to 4 years ago with Franklin. And We really need to reevaluate that as a district, as a community. What is working, what is not working? Where are we going with that? I still don't even know as a board member what is the plan, and we really need to reevaluate that and communicate that well. So because people are obviously asking, well, are those going to be STEM schools? What are STEM? You know, it's very confusing still to the community. So we need to figure that out.
So if I could just interject there, we are currently, and I'll be providing a board report on this, and Sarah and I just talked today about how we memorialize this practice in our board policy. So as a district, we have done a number of outside requests for reviews of certain departments and/or programs. So for example, starting this next week, Carla Lobos is working with a gentleman who's coming in to, actually there's two organizations, Hanover Research and Cal, coming in to do a review of our bilingual program. Hanover Research is doing a review of our STEM programs based on the board's request last year. So those reviews are happening this spring, and I'll get a more comprehensive report to the board. And certainly that's a question that I get asked to Dr. Richardson, so we need to formulate a response to the community.
Yeah, that's good. I think, you know, this outside consultant stuff is good. I'd really like to see some sort of wide stakeholder input. I'd love to hear from the students, the parents that have gone to these schools, that have gone to McGee and then went to Franklin, that went to Robinson and then Curie. You know, I'd really like to get input from all the people that have been affected by that, the teachers that have gone there, the teachers that have taught at a traditional school and a STEM school. Like, I really want to hear the feedback from all those people in our community, and I think the outside consultant is a good part of that. But there's so much, I think, pent-up information and feedback that would love to be provided if given that opportunity by our community.
So I think you and I are absolutely on the same page. That actually is written into the Hanover review, is that there's a robust stakeholder, either survey and/or stakeholder group kind of opportunities. So I think we're on the same page. I'll just make sure that I get all those details ferreted out in a board report for you, so you can have an update on what we've been up to.
President Christensen, I have one more question. Was it intentional that we have 3 bids in the June-July 2019 period? Is there efficiencies to put 3 bids out during the same period, or would it be more desirable to stagger those so that people have more time to prepare bids? Do you guys have an answer for that one?
Yes, sir. The schedules you see there are very definitive on there, but yes, we have a plan to stagger those bids, you know, with maybe 3 weeks between. We did that in 2013 when we put out 3 bids during that summer too. So there's some coordination that needs to be done there to stagger those and to look across the river and see what's going on with other projects so that we can coordinate with the other districts also.
Okay. So some of those, if there is a little bit of extra time in a design period, we could, right now it's showing 3 bid periods stacked right on top of each other in parallel, but eventually you'll work it so that they're in series or staggered in some way.
Now, when I put that schedule together, you know, I wasn't going to make any decisions whether it's going to be 1 month ahead or 1 month back, you know, variation. It's just a real generic.
Thank you. Thanks, Kim.
Okay, so let's, all right, so, now, board, we've been asked if we've been asked if we would provide a school board representative, a member of the school board, to be involved in this process. Is there any discussion on that? Anybody who feels like they would be interested in that and has the time to make the commitment? I guess maybe we should talk about that. What is the time commitment on this?
I think it would be if the person would like to be present at any of our either community builder group meetings or other meetings related to the long-term facilities management planning, and or also participate in, sit in, observe meetings that take place regarding the various educational specification steps for the 4 schools. Those would be, and for example, our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, January 31, from 1:30 to 5 for the follow-up meeting with MMEC regarding educational specifications for the middle schools. So that would be one of the first ones.
I would really anticipate anywhere from like 3 hours a month on the light months, but up to 12 hours a month on the months where there was a little bit more heavy lifting. So that would be the time commitment that I would be anticipating.
So the community builder meetings, I think when we're talking about long-term facilities, is that going to be, are we talking, I guess the question is, are the meetings during the day? Obviously, the 1 to 5 is
That's
during
for
the
the-
day.
Mhm.
Are the others, are there meetings that are at night when?
Yes.
when-
Well, the community builders group meetings are in the evening. We may have some input meetings that we may do in the evenings regarding some of the projects, but that's yet to be
So I'm
determined.
guessing that at least half of the time would be during the workday. Okay. So there's some information. Is there any interest in any, well, I guess another question would be, so is there anybody that feels like they could take that on?
I feel like not commit to that.
Okay.
There's a possibility that I could do that. This is also the thing, anyway, what if we could make it like to 2 hours of those meetings or 3 hours and we have to leave early? Do you want somebody who's there, or do you want somebody who can be there 100%?
We recognize this is an additional lift to the already multitude of hours that you volunteer. So certainly we want to be mindful of that and only ask you to be at the meetings where we feel like there's, would best utilize your time. So, if you could be there for an hour of a 2-hour meeting, we'll take what we can get. And again, we recognize and we want to be mindful of the impact to you. You guys volunteer a lot of time. This just is a really critical kind of piece for us, and we want to make sure that we have all the kind of stakeholder advisory groups represented as we continue to plan and move forward.
You said half the time would be during the day?
I'm kind of a little bit spitballing. I mean, if for the board liaison member, you could meet at 3, we could do our best to schedule the meetings at 3. I mean, it's just a big stakeholder group, so to try to get calendars coordinated is kind of a challenge.
So I'm wondering, do we need a single board member, or if we split this up among multiple board members, are you looking for input from a board, or just to get the information back to the board?
We're inviting you to consider participating if it works for you. And how it looks, I mean, it could vary, I would guess. Our intent is to be able to do everything we can to ensure that information is provided and that we have a liaison who can communicate with the rest of the board. And
I like that idea. I appreciate the invitation. I think it would be good if we had a liaison there. I don't know that it necessarily needs to be the same person at every meeting. Just we could come back and report just during communications the things that are happening in that period. But
What do you feel? Do you think it needs to be the same person, or do you think we could divide and conquer?
The challenge with it being different people is the meetings kind of build on one another. And so if you drop into a meeting and you weren't there for the prior meeting, kind of understanding the rationale for how we got to where we got can sometimes be a challenge. So I think ideally it would be the same person. If we had to choose between having the same person or having no one, we would take a split representative. I'm
well, you might have one person half the time. I mean, not able to make every meeting. And so there would be some lack of continuity there as well. So
And the first meeting is Tuesday, January 30th? Okay.
which is actually the second meeting of the Educational Specifications Steering Committee for the middle schools.
All right, so I'm not seeing any takers.
I
So-
will try to do it.
I'd be willing
as much as I can. Oh,
to split, but I can't
Okay.
commit to halftime day meetings, and so.
Okay, I'll take it on.
Okay.
And if it doesn't work out, then great.
So let's do this, Sherry, if you will do that, but if you can't make it to a meeting, if you could call Amy or Scott or even myself, I would like to be involved as well, but I can't make the full-time commitment, so. So,
January 30th. Thanks, Steve, sorry.
and yes, if we can get a schedule, I don't know how far out those meetings are scheduled, but if we can get a schedule and then we can look at it and where Sherry can't make it, we'll fill in the holes.
Thank you, Sherry.
Yes, thank you.
So, January 30th, and is it here?
The 31st, Tuesday, I think. Oh, no, wait, it is the
31st
30th.
is the
Sorry.
Wednesday.
So it's Tuesday, the 30th.
Okay, and here?
1:30 to 5, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if when I go back and look at my calendar and it's a different location, we'll let you know, Sherry. I just don't have it in front of me.
Okay.
All right, so I think we've solved that one.
All right.
Any other questions on this subject from the board?
I just had a suggestion. Maybe the meetings can be recorded, and then if the person that gets this is not there, they could still watch what went on the meeting.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Okay. All right, so is there anybody in the audience that wants to make any comments to the board on this subject? Mr. Grimm, you got 2 minutes or less.
Board President Christensen, Superintendent Whitney, members of the board. I think this was a really good presentation. So I just want to commend district staff for putting this together. I think you guys are asking really good questions. And I think a school board representative in some of these processes is very important. So thank you, Ms. Lincoln, for volunteering to do that, and Mr. Lehrman and Ms. Phillips. But I think this was, for me, and what I would like to see, I like what I see. So I would just like to say good job to the staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grimm. Thank you for your input in this process as well. All right, anything else, Dr. Reyes?
I do. I wanted to see if I could show you our website and the link for the bond updates that we have available for our community and staff to keep track of where we are in the process.
She didn't want to do that presentation.
Okay, so this is our website, right? And we have a banner, and on this banner, you'll see that we have Follow Our Bond Projects link. And you click on that, and you'll go to what Shane calls the landing page. And this page, on the left-hand side, you can click on any one of these items to learn more about specific pieces or components of the process or projects. And then we have, further down on the landing page, links to each project and which, when you click on the links, you'll see where we are at different stages of the project. So, for example, using the timeline key, you can see with the check mark what's taken place. The green is in process and the red is not yet started. So this provides our stakeholders an opportunity to check in with us online and see where we are in these processes. Our goal is to include pictures and maybe some drone video of some of the action once we get going. And then after the levy election in February, the link here at the top of the screen will say bond projects or something to that effect, so that people can go directly to the link via that route if they don't see it on the banner.
That is wonderful. I love that. Thank you for doing that, whomever
Good
did
job,
that.
Shane.
What?
Shane and Joelle, I think.
Shane and Joelle, thank you so much. That is going to be so helpful. I can't wait to post that one just for links for everybody, and hopefully, and I noticed your question and answers section there that you can list some of the questions that we already had as a board. So this is fabulous. These are crucial pieces of information with our public, and I just think that's what our job is as a district and as a board. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. That does conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Reyes. All right. Agenda item 9C, data bite. Ms. Carla Lobos.
So Carla is approaching the podium here while Mark helps get us squared back away after our commercial break from the board packet to the website. Carla is really in front of you just to show some data that's a follow-up to last board presentation around the outrageous outcome. So data bites are a mechanism that the board has asked us to focus in over time. I think the piece I want to highlight here is my goal is for these to become more robust in student achievement data as the data dashboard becomes more available. So just so you're aware that this is kind of a beginning of with an end product that isn't as focused on things like conference data, et cetera. It'll be more student achievement focused moving forward. But for tonight, Carla would share some information around the extracurricular K-3 information.
Absolutely. Board President Christensen, Superintendent Whitney, members of the board, it's my pleasure to be with you this evening. And I am here to review extracurricular K-3 data with you. So this is a reminder, and I know we had a lot of conversations today about our outrageous outcomes, and so I'm going to share with you a small data bite that supports our 100% of students are engaged in extracurricular activities. And I do believe earlier in the year, Ms. Whitney did bring to you some of that information for other grade levels and such, and so we were going to come back to you once we had gathered information for conferences at our primary grades at our elementary. And I'm going to share that with you here shortly, but I wanted to also thank our principals that are in the audience for getting that information to us and calculating that for us. So this is our data, and this represents our participation rate in kinder, first, second, and third grade, which is how we're measuring that outrageous outcome for those grade levels at the elementary. And as you can see, at all 4 grade levels, we have over 90% attendance rates. And I did have principals soliciting me in the back at this time saying, and we had 9 parents did not, and we are still trying to schedule those, trying to reach 100%. So just to let you know that our teachers and our principals really understand the value of, and I know you heard during Carrie's presentation of embedding those, also the goal setting and all that into conferences. So, and this shows our tremendous support of our community and our families for the learning of our students in our schools.
And this is every single school district-wide, the parent-teacher
This is
conferences.
district-wide, attendance rates, kinder through third grade, correct.
Attendance
For conferences.
for conferences. Okay, that's much higher than I expected.
Attendance for schedule, for those scheduled that showed up, or attendance of the whole population?
Attendance of the whole population.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes. So thank you.
I can't believe it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lobos.
Welcome.
Any questions, comments from the board? I think that's great, and it probably helps to have community schools where parents are close to their school and they can get there and interact with the teacher. But I think it goes to show the level of involvement of our both our teachers and our parents. I'm sure some of those parents would not have been there if our teachers were not reaching out to them and keeping them looped in the education of their students. So thank you.
Can you send us those numbers in the Friday update by school?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
We do have that. One of the things, just knowing and working with principals and having been in a building that they do, is that during when conferences are occurring, they're monitoring the attendance rate and parents that have come. And so they're very active in calling, rescheduling, getting, and as our teachers are as well, of getting parents in. And so that's one of the reasons. It's the efforts on behalf of all the staff to get our families in. That's why you see such high rates.
Is that attended one conference during the whole year, or is that this fall set that just happened?
It's the fall that just occurred.
Yeah, we're all in awe. Way to go, principals and teachers.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lobos. That includes reports and discussions, and it looks like there are no action items in this meeting, so we will move on to consent agenda. Personnel, warrants, district policy revision, deletion 610, 6120, or 6110, 6120, 6122. New 1620 board superintendent relationship, 1630 evaluation of the superintendent. Item D, district policy revision, new 4222 senior citizens gold card. E, overnight student travel, Pasco High, Future Farmers of America. To the, is that 212-360 Leadership Conference? F, overnight student travel, Chiawana Pasco High speech and debate teams to attend the Honorable Thomas Foley Memorial Speech and Debate Competition. G, overnight student travel, Pasco High School Distributive Education Clubs of America to DECA State Career Development Conference. And H, overnight student travel, Pasco High School Wind Ensemble to the Washington State Music Education Annual Conference Performance. Do I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I need a second.
Second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as presented. Could we get a roll call?
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
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 Thank you. Future agenda items.
So I wanted just to call the board's attention to the study session on the 13th, which is on the bond planning process. Trevor Carlson will be here to talk about bond financing and sales. That will be the focus of the study session. In the board meeting, it will continue follow-up tonight's report from Susanna on long-term facilities management planning process. She's been working collaboratively with the Community Builders Group and also doing research locally and statewide about what other districts' planning processes look like in terms of structure. So do they maintain a advisory group all year long and bring community stakeholder groups in as needed, et cetera. So she'll have kind of a recommendation of what that process would look like moving forward, both based on research and input from the Community Builders Group. We'll also follow up with the board report that I talked about in terms of Carla taking what Mark presented and illustrating how that could be used at or will be used at the building level in coordination with some PD with Dr. Cruz. We'll be doing a data bite on data specific to the student achievement of the students in IPAL in preparation for the next board meeting where you'll get an IPAL update, and we'll focus on the strategy or STAR 360 data during the board meeting. And then the following board meeting on the 27th, there'll be capital facilities plan. That's the plan that we have to work through in collaboration with the city to allow us to collect impact fees. And then during that study session, you'll also look at some building capacity data frameworks that Susanna and Randy have been working on. We will again be requesting an executive session under 4231-10-1G for both personnel and the superintendent's evaluation. I'm anticipating the study session will take about 60 minutes to complete those two pieces.
So this concludes this portion of our meeting. We will recess into executive session, and you are welcome to stay around until we adjourn if you would like. We will be about 60 minutes.